Changes for women in Nazi Germany. And there were several ways that the Nazis changed the lives of women. The first one, which is really a huge change actually, was in the area of marriage and family. The Nazis were absolutely convinced that they needed to increase the birth rate in Germany. If Hitler was going to have an army big enough to conquer large swathes of land around the world, he needed more soldiers. And when he came to power, he identified the fact that the birth rate in Germany was too low for him to be able to guarantee that. So there were several changes that the Nazis introduced. First of all, there was a massive propaganda campaign that was launched to try and persuade women to have more children. On top of that, Hitler announced that on the 12th of August every year would now be National Mother's Day, where medals would actually be awarded to women who had large families. This was called the Mother's Cross. The Mother's Cross, and women who had certain amounts of children would get the Mother's Cross. So, for example, if you had 8 children, you got the gold one. If you had 6 children, you got the silver one. And if you had 4 children, you got the Bronze Cross. So it was about propaganda more than anything, but also it was about recognising women, the more children that they had. They also gave out loans for women, and the more children you had, the less money you actually had to pay back on those loans. What about single women? Because not all women were actually married, even though the Nazis really actually encouraged that. Not all women were married. So what Hitler proposed was that these women would visit things called Lebensborns or Lebensborn. And in English, that is life springs. It sounds very pleasant, doesn't it? But actually, what these Lebensborn were SS brothels, where SS men were waiting there for single women to come and, as Hitler called it, donate a baby to the state. So in other words, to actually get pregnant with a man from the SS who would, a perfect Aryan from the SS in one of these Lebensborns. All of these policies clubbed together really promoted this idea that Hitler wanted to increase the birth rate. We'll talk about whether he was successful in that later. There were other areas that they changed the lives of women, notably jobs. A lot of women, first of all, were sacked. So, for example, if you were a teacher who was a woman in 1933, you would be sacked. If you were a civil servant, you would be sacked. If you were a doctor, you would be sacked. And actually, this was a bit of a shock for some women, but for others, some of them actually liked the idea of actually living at home and having children. But obviously, for others who had a career, this was not very good news for them. And again, we mentioned the loans. These loans would be given and would almost entice women out of work because they were going to get money. Sorry, I just crossed that out. I didn't mean to. They would be getting money to actually have more children. So first of all, women were sacked from their jobs. And the real slogan that the Nazis used and promoted was the 3Ks when it came to women. And you might have heard of this one, Kinder, Kirche, Küche. Kinder, Kirche, Küche, in English, children, church. Cooking. Did Hitler really care about church? Well, if you look at the previous video on the church, no, he didn't. He was far from Christian, but he appreciated the kind of traditions that went along with it and promoting family values and so on and so forth. So the big Nazi slogan was the 3Ks: have more children and be a stay-at-home mum. was the message that was coming across loud and clear. So that's jobs. In terms of appearance, the Nazis were very, very clear on the appearance they expected women to take up. They did not want makeup. They did not want women to wear high heels or trousers. They didn't want women to go on slimming programs to lose weight. They wanted women who could have lots and lots of children. So they wanted wide-hipped women, plain-looking, would sink into the background. And a massive part of this was women should not get involved in politics. That should be left to the husband. And this, again, was a bit of a shock because in the Weimar era, up to 1933, a lot of women were actually involved in politics. Some of them were members of the Reichstag. So this was a real turnaround from the role of women in the Weimar Republic in the 1920s. In fact, it was the complete opposite, really. Women were expected to be childbearers, to have children, and that was their role. It was not to strut around, looking beautiful or wearing lots of makeup or to wear short skirts and so on. So that is how the Nazis tried to change the role of women. Employment of women did go down. And the funny thing is, from 1937 onwards, the Nazis really tried to reverse the job, the changes they've made with regards to jobs, because they realised the war was coming. They appealed to women to come back into work. This really didn't work because most women had been indoctrinated with these Nazi views. They weren't going to go into work, and even towards the end of the war, 1942, 1943, they couldn't get women to work in armaments factories because their answer was, well, we're good Nazi women and we're not going in there, whereas, of course, other countries had fully mobilised women into the workforce.